Journey Across the Stars, a short story by Reddit user MarshmellowBoggert. The last 3 months were the hardest for him to endure. It wasn't the same life he'd had before the attack. He was back on his feet and working with his team. It didn't feel right to return home to an empty house, with nothing to do but worry about where he'd be going next. But after what happened, he wanted to stay away from everyone, until they were sure he would recover. Until he knew himself better than ever. When he returned to the ship, he found a small package sitting in front of his door. He stared at it for a long time, then walked into the room he used as an office. With trembling hands, he tore open the paper. Inside was a letter written by a man he hadn't seen in many years. The note simply read, "My dearest son, I hope this finds you well. We need to talk. Please come visit me soon and bring your family. Love always, Dad." He felt tears running down his cheeks. This was exactly what he needed. Not people looking over his shoulder or asking questions he couldn't answer. Just his father and his family together again. If his father's words could bring light back to the galaxy, he would go anywhere with those words in mind. 2 weeks later, he was on the flight to the Star Blaster. It seemed like forever since he'd left, and yet the trip to his old ship still felt unreal. Once upon a time, that place meant everything to him. Now, it was just a memory. He was excited to see his parents again. He knew they wouldn't be there physically, but he missed their presence nonetheless. His mother's hugs and kisses, his father's warm smiles and stories. There was nothing he could imagine better than having that kind of relationship again. Once inside, he was immediately welcomed by a tall, dark-skinned woman. She was wearing a white dress that fell almost to the ground with a blue ribbon tied around her waist. Her long red hair flowed down her back in loose curls. She held out her arms as soon as she saw him, and he stepped forward to embrace her. "Oh, Alex, you're here!" his mother cried happily. "Hey, Mom," Alex smiled. He could see the joy in her eyes. She took his hand and started leading him through the ship. They spent the next few hours talking about his childhood, about his studies. Alex told her about the work he was doing with his new partner, Captain Rook. His mother told him how much he'd grown up. After several hours of catching each other up, Alex excused himself to go take a shower. He felt tired and sore after spending all day working outside. While he was getting ready, his comm went off. "Sir, we've got another problem," one of his men called out. Alex sighed. "Show me the problem, Ensign." A few minutes later, he arrived on a bridge. A holographic projection of one of the planets they were orbiting was floating above a large screen. The planet looked to be about half the size of the Earth. "This planet has been hit hard," Ensign Bly said. "Its defenses are completely down, sir. It seems to be uninhabited." The planet was covered in jungle, and there wasn't any visible signs of civilization. Alex studied the image for a moment, taking it all in. It seemed like there had been something wrong with the planet. Something he had overlooked, but what? There was a sudden beep on his comm, and he pulled it out to listen. It was an urgent message from Captain Rook. "We need you down here, immediately. A distress signal is coming from the planet below us." "Understood." Alex entered the transmission and headed back to the bridge. As he made his way down the corridor, he could hear yelling coming from down the hall. "What the hell is happening now?" he muttered under his breath. As he approached the source of the noise, he heard a familiar voice. It sounded angry. That was unusual. Usually Rook was the calm one. "We'll be fine. You just focus on saving the damn planet." He recognized the voice immediately. His mother. "That might not happen anymore. If we don't get help soon..." There was a loud crash and then silence. A moment later, the room filled with smoke, and his mother coughed violently. The air seemed stale and thick. Alex rushed towards the scene. When he reached her, he could see his mother clutching her throat in pain. "Mom!" He tried to help her stand, but he stumbled backwards. His legs suddenly gave out beneath him, and his mother collapsed beside him. She clutched his arm desperately, trying to support herself. "Mom!" Alex struggled to say. She turned her head towards him, and he gasped in horror. Tears were streaming down her face. Her lips were turning purple. "Help us! Help us!" The smoke cleared, and he could make out his mother's terrified cries. The other crew members began rushing towards them. Suddenly his heart stopped as he realized he couldn't move. His muscles had seized up and refused to respond. All he could think was that his mother was dying right in front of him. He watched helplessly as the body convulsed in agony. She let out a blood-curdling scream and then fell silent. Alex screamed silently. He felt numb. He couldn't move. His heart was beating faster than he'd ever experienced it beat in his entire life. Every part of his body felt frozen. "We need help!" someone shouted, but no one moved. He heard a faint sobbing sound. He looked up and saw his father kneeling next to him, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Dad," Alex managed to choke out. "Help her, please." His dad looked down at his wife and slowly raised his hand to his forehead. For several moments he said nothing. Then he placed his palm flat against her forehead and closed his eyes. The sound of someone crying pierced his ears, and he glanced over to see his father cradling his wife in his arms. "No, no, no!" Alex opened his mouth to yell, but couldn't find his voice. He felt helpless and afraid. His knees buckled underneath him as his vision grew blurry. He was unable to move. His mother lay motionless in his father's arms, and Alex felt sick. Sick and cold. He wanted nothing more than to cry, but his body refused. His breathing quickened, his chest tightened painfully. He wanted to reach out and touch his mother, but every attempt he made only sent a jolt of agony shooting through his body. He was trapped in place, alone in his own head. He looked past his father, at his younger sister standing close by, watching silently. Her green eyes wide and frightened. Everything was too much for Alex. He couldn't breathe. His lungs felt raw, as if he'd been screaming without realizing it. He couldn't see straight. Everything was blurry. Everything hurt. He blacked out.